Like, I didn't just wake up one day and I'm in Costa Rica, earning six figures. And so what started as potentially a movement to uplift and, encourage women to do their thing turned into something that was leading to burnout. What skills do you need to make this a reality? And then how can you acquire them? I'm convinced that most of us don't want to be boss babes. We don't want to necessarily be corporate baddies for the next 50 years or, hustling hard until the end of eternity to pay for, Hermes bags or, Gucci slides. Like, I think a lot of us are craving something that's a little bit more fundamental. It's deeper, and it's effectively freedom, right? Freedom takes many forms. For some of us, it's geographical freedom. Right? Like right now, I am working remotely from Costa Rica. For others, it's more intellectual freedom, like the price that they pay or the value that they put on being able to express themselves and engage with their intellectual curiosity when it comes to work is of high importance to them. For others, it's more time freedom and flexibility. Like, those are the things that allow us to craft a world or craft a life that's more aligned with us. And it's not necessarily linked to this boss babe attitude. Now, the reason I kind of wanted to talk about this is because it's something I've thought about over the years. And I think I've kind of grappled with, I'm not a boss babe, but I definitely see some of the pros of the kind of movement or I don't say aesthetic, I say more of a movement, right? Because it's not all bad. I think the boss babe hustling culture has got a little bit of a bad rap and some of it's justified, but there are merits to this, right? Like, there's some things that we want to take from it and other things we're like, actually, could do without that one. Can leave that one behind. And I'm saying this to you as I am sitting in sunny Costa Rica working remotely, something that I kind of always wanted to do. Like, geographical freedom was always something that was huge for me, and this got me thinking about how do we develop lives right now that don't necessarily involve being an influencer tomorrow or basically starting a business tomorrow, which those are options, we'll talk about those, but like, that's not the only way you can craft a life that is more fulfilling. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's unpack a little bit about boss babe, what we can take, what we can leave behind, but more importantly, how you can actually take tangible steps towards crafting a life that has that kind of freedom embedded in it in a way that makes sense for you, because it may not be the same as what I need or what the next person or the next woman needs, right? And it's not going to be the same throughout your life. So let's just talk about it. Okay, so let's unpack a little bit more about boss babing, and actually I want to touch on influencer culture a little bit as well. So the boss babe aesthetical movement came about in, I would say, like the 2010s, effectively. Like, this was the period where the boss babe was on the rise, this idea of the woman being the go-getter, building things, hustling, like getting it from the ground up. We're talking like companies that are valued at millions and things like this, things that, again, are not necessarily bad things, but what came with it was a lot of the things we had criticized the corporate world or like the more masculine world for, right? These long hours, these not listening to our bodies, not understanding that there are things that are unique to potentially women and the way that we socialize and what we need from our work, and how these things balance with our actual biological cycles and things like this. Like, we kind of neglected that because the new focus became men can do it, we can do it. And that's not necessarily to say we can't, but do we need to do it the same way? Does everybody need to be doing the same thing? Even if we go beyond gender for a moment, do we all need to be bossing it in the same way, right? Does that still make sense? And so what started as potentially a movement to uplift and, encourage women to do their thing turned into something that was leading to burnout and was leading to potentially debt and just these crazy hours and high stress and taking a physical toll on sleep and a lot of other biological factors that impact the quality of life. And it's interesting because I think the rise in influencers specifically, or like content creation, is linked to this rejection of not just the corporate world but also this boss babe world, this hustling world. And the thing is, this is why you're having people who don't even necessarily like creating content. Like, there are some of us who, we were making content when no one was watching us, right? And I'm not saying that we're still making content and, money's not a thing or whatever, but just doing it because we actually liked making content. Like, we really liked getting on camera and talking about whatever it was that we were talking about. We enjoyed doing that. And now you're seeing a rise in people who actually don't really want to, but they're feeling like, what is my alternative? I don't want to potentially live life and hustle in a particular type of way, whether that be corporate, whether it be boss babing, whatever. How do I craft a life that has that freedom that I was alluding to at the beginning? And the influencer route seems like the route, but it's not the only one. And that's what I really want to get into in the second kind of half of this video is, so if not that, then what else? Like, what if you don't want to be an influencer? Or maybe you want to be an influencer, but you also want to do something else. Okay, so let's get into the actual practical steps then, because I've spoken a lot about, we want freedom. It can take many forms. It's not necessarily about being a boss babe. But then how do you get there? Because I knew, and I've said this in other videos, I knew from the first job that I got that this kind of working for someone in this particular dynamic until I was like 65, the retirement age is probably going to be 75 by the time I'm there, wasn't going to be optimal for me. Like just going into one location and, turning up and that's kind of life. And then you go home, you clock out. Like, that wasn't going to do it for me for the next 50 years. And I knew that from my first job. And then everything I think I've been doing since then, almost everything I've been doing is to try to create a life where I have the freedom to make certain choices, to make certain decisions, to spend in certain ways as well. Because it's not, listen, when I said to you it wasn't about getting an LV bag or a Christian Dior this, I like nice things and I like nice experiences. But how have I done this? And how have I continued to do this? And a lot of it is about understanding what you want and then how you can achieve it. So the first thing is about defining what freedom means to you and what elements are most important to you. Right? Because like I said, it can take different forms, right? We can speak more broadly about financial freedom because that kind of opens up a whole world. But if we're talking about right now because we have bills to pay and we have responsibilities, what can we prioritize? What freedom for us would be the most important if we had to put a label on it? Maybe it's time freedom, right? Maybe for you right now, you need more time with yourself or you need more time with your family or for your health. And at that point, time freedom becomes the most important thing. And so the decisions that you make in the life that you craft needs to be with that in mind. Maybe it's geographical freedom, right? Like right now, I need to be able to be kind of wherever I want. And it could be because you just want to explore the world, like kind of similar to me, but it could be because you have family spread out or somebody who's not well. And, right now you need to prioritize that freedom because you can't be necessarily in the office in London or, in New York when you have somebody who you're caring for or helping out in your family somewhere else, or you just want to be closer to your family, right? Maybe that is the priority because once you have that understanding, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to be the only priority for the rest of your life. Like, I'm not saying geographical freedom is the only thing I want. Like, I have big dreams, right? Big dreams for the life that I want to live. But I'm also trying to balance things at the moment. So for this first step, I would say try to write down your ideal day, right? And pick out those things, the most important things that stand out. Perhaps you wake up and you're somewhere like this. Or perhaps you wake up and actually you get to explore yourself creatively that day, right? Like your job or your business or the work that you do allows you creative freedom. And that's the bit in your, ideal day that's really sticking out to you. The fact that you get to spend 8 hours maybe painting or, or crafting a social media campaign for somebody, or actually being in the lab researching something like that. That sort of freedom is the thing, because you can tell how it's guiding the types of jobs that you might do or the way you might structure work. But I always like to be realistic. I am an optimist at my core, and I believe a lot of things are possible. But we have to ground ourselves in reality, right? So yes, I want those things, but then, okay, what am I willing to compromise on the other side, right? Because it may be that right now you're not a millionaire, right? And so you can't just have everything at once. And so geographical freedom might come at a cost of another type of freedom, like creative freedom at this point in time for the job that you want. There are jobs that they are rare, but they overlap and they have a multitude of these things: time, flexibility, creative and intellectual freedom and geographical freedom. And they're also really well paid, right? But if we're saying that we don't have abundant access to all of them right now, if I had to prioritize the thing that would have the greatest impact, what on the other side am I willing to compromise, right? Because here is where I think people go wrong, myself included. We've made these kind of big steps without really working out, what can I say no to right now? Think about this. A lot of people who've turned to being an influencer have had to go back because the reality was they weren't making enough money, right? Sure, they had creative freedom and they had, perhaps intellectual freedom and even geographical freedom and time freedom to an extent. But now there was the financial element was taking a hit, right? And we don't have to rush necessarily to the most nuclear version of things, right? Straight from here to business owner, straight from here to influencer, straight from here to whatever, insert thing that, allows you to live the life you want. We can take steps towards that. And at the same time, you say things like our job, like using your 9 to 5 to, to kind of flourish and kind of build up towards that, right? There is value in the 9 to 5, which sometimes is hard for us. And I literally, I'm speaking to myself as well at the same time. Like we forget, like, damn, this job is allowing me right now to be right here in Costa Rica in a very nice apartment, right? Like enjoying the food that I eat, not really having to worry about spending on this or that. Like I have freedom because of it. Do I have time and flexibility freedom? Maybe not so much, right? Because I do still have to clock in and do my hours and get the work done. Do I have intellectual freedom? To an extent. Like I'm lucky that the jobs that I do are actually really quite flexible, right? And they allow me to input quite a lot, but they are still within a particular realm. Like it's not like I'm just doing anything, or like, you know, as a kid who studied geography, like I'm out in the wild just, you know, sampling things. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing things within the realm of tech for this particular company, but I'm gaining on the other side. So I said, you know, it's okay if I don't have as much intellectual and creative freedom at work right now because of all these other things I gain. So you ask yourself and be realistic, right? If money is, you know, a problem right now, or if it's a concern, you're not someone who can just be like, I have a year's worth of savings and runway that I'm willing to burn through to make this other thing happen, then don't necessarily jump out the, you know, out the wagon and be like, boom, don't care, just going to do it anyway. You want to give yourself the best options. And I should clarify, I don't think it's a problem if you try something and have to go back to something else. So, right, those influencers who are now, you know, they're going back to their 9 to 5s. They had it a go. At least they gave it a shot, right? But I'm saying, how can we potentially avoid some of these pitfalls and some of these downsides in advance, right? Even if we do all this stuff, we might still have to go back or like, you know, circle back or be like, actually, I'm going to get a job that's a little bit more secure. The next then is to identify the jobs, businesses, or the type of work that will allow you to achieve these things, right? So once you know what is the priority, and once you know what you're willing to compromise on, and you've taken all of these things into consideration, then it's time to actually start looking for the type of work that meets those requirements. This is why research is so important, because there are people doing jobs that you wouldn't even imagine, right? Like they are doing things that you've never even heard of. I don't really think that I even thought about, you know, being around the world or in Costa Rica as an SRE, a site reliability engineer, when I was in uni. Even when I was in school, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know this life was an option. So it's really important to expose yourself to these things, right? Like expose yourself to people who are living alternative lifestyles, or who are living lives that, you know, align with the freedom that you are also trying to achieve. Look for them. There's like between YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you're telling me you can't find somebody who has, you know, the geographical overlap, maybe the kind of intellectual work that you do, or somebody who's built a business around a particular skill that gives them that kind of freedom. And I'm a very analytical person at heart. I try to be anyway. And so pick out, like when you identify these roles. And also another thing I didn't mention is use ChatGPT, which I probably try to slip into every conversation, but like use AI to like kind of draw out, these are things that are important to me. These are the skills that I have. Like, how can I mix this, the skills that I have, the life that I want to live? What jobs would give me that? What configuration of work or business would give me that? That was just a side note thing, but yeah, love chat. Anyway, once you kind of have all that, then you have a framework to start working with, right? It's very hard when things are abstract, when I kind of don't know what freedom I want, or what's really important to me, or what I'm willing to say no to, or what kind of jobs and work and businesses would allow me to do this. Without that, it becomes very hard to actually achieve anything. Like you'll be sitting there talking about financial freedom until the cows come home, or until geographical freedom, or insert whatever freedom, literally until you're 75 and like, oh, didn't do it. Oh, I didn't do it. Okay, but it's one thing to kind of educate yourself on what's out there and, you know, kind of research into the type of jobs you want. The next step then becomes the investment portion. Like, are you willing now to invest the time, the money, the resources necessary to get you there? Because you don't just wake up one day and have it. As much as sometimes I feel like social media can lead you to think, it's not like that. Like, I didn't just wake up one day and I'm in Costa Rica, you know, earning 6 figures and living a life that I am. It took work. It took sacrifices. It took me actually identifying that if this is the kind of jobs that would allow me this life, I have to upskill. I have to be skilled and versed in, say, programming or cloud engineering if I'm going to go down that particular route, right? Or if it's going to be more of a social media kind of route, then you have to get skilled in like, how do you create content, video creation, audio, optimizing, all sorts of things. Like, what skills do you need to make this a reality? And then how can you acquire them? Right, so I did a boot camp that I didn't actually have to pay for. So I was actually paid to learn, a very, very small, we can call it a stipend maybe. But I had to invest time, and I knew I was making less money than probably even just doing like maybe a 9 to 5 as a receptionist. I was making less than that, but I knew the payoff. I knew what was going to be there on the other side. So I made the investment to get here. right? I made the investment in the time, the resources, and in the platforms that I'd actually invested in even before that. Like I took out Code Academy, like you could get an annual subscription, which cost a little bit, right? It cost, but I knew what I was doing it for. I knew why I was working towards this track. I've got to wrap this up because these mosquitoes are starting to bite me up and I can't do it. I think then the final thing is to take action and be decisive. Remember, you don't have to do this forever. I don't necessarily have to be, working in tech forever in the same capacity I am. It may evolve. The type of work I do in tech may evolve. I may form my own business, and that's okay. I might decide I'm done with this, living all around the world or moving about. I want to do something else. I want to be settled somewhere, and maybe, that's my base. Whatever. Or I might decide, what? Intellectual and creative freedom is so important for me at this stage in my life that I'm willing to compromise, maybe even on pay right now or for something else. Right? So once you allow yourself that knowledge and acceptance that, hey, I can change, I can move, I evolve, that's just me, then you can be decisive and take action without fear of locking yourself into any one thing for the rest of your life. Commitment is important, but understanding that you can move about and you can be flexible and you can evolve is also critical. Anyway, that's why we want to talk about, we can learn from a lot of the good parts about the whole boss babe movement, about the working hard and being realistic and, setting out goals and, taking action and being committed. But we don't have to necessarily live lives that are, that look one way, right? My life and my freedom doesn't have to look like yours, right? My form of luxury doesn't need to look like yours. And that's okay. I will see you in the next video because I'm done with these. I'm done with the mosquitoes.